Good afternoon, everybody. I apologize for being late. If we just want to get seated, we can get going. How are you, Anne Marie? Sure. Thank you. All right. Thank you, everyone, for being here. We'll call the Neighborhood Subcommittee meeting to order. Do a roll call.
Chairman Leahy,
Here.
Council Mercia.
Here.
Council Samaras.
Here.
3 present.
Thank you. So we're here today on issues about parking in the neighborhoods generally, for a general discussion. There was a motion by Council Rourke and Council Samaras specifically to parking in the back central neighborhood. So we'll start with that, and then we'll branch out throughout the neighborhoods over the last month or two at the neighborhood meetings throughout the city. This subject has been coming up, so tonight we'll have a good discussion. We have people here from the city to help us answer our questions. So I guess with the motion, we'll start with the back central neighborhood. If there's registered speakers, so we'll hear from you first, and then we'll open up the floor. Thank you.
Good evening, councilors. My name is Bill Daly. I live in 40 Floyd Street, and I'm with the Back Central Neighborhood Association. As you probably all know, you've got emails from me, calls. We have a lot of problems back there with placards, illegal placards, the red and white placards, do not park here, you know, the whole 9 yards. And really, it's out of control with the parking. And I have a couple of suggestions. I don't want to tie up the mic. Okay, first of all, I'd like to see a designated department, preferably the parking department, handle the situation. As it stands right now, since this ordinance has been put in effect, there hasn't been one citation issued, not one. So either we're going to have it enforced, or what I like to see is especially, I'm just speaking for Back Central, get rid of the placards. They're out of control, they're not being enforced, they're not placed where they're supposed to be placed. They were supposed to be put at the end of your property and get 20 feet. Everybody has one, puts it right in the middle of their property. Who are you going to call? Nobody. No one knows who to call. No one knows who's supposed to enforce it. When the ordinance was put into effect, it was never directed at who was supposed to enforce it or whatever. So tonight, I'd like to see that addressed, have certain department, like I said, I'd like to see the parking department, who handles the parking downtown. It seems obvious that they should be, you know, Jim Proop does a yeoman job down there. I'm sure he'd do a great job in the neighborhoods too. Okay, and okay, basically was enforcement displayed. Here's something that my brother told me about. The signs, when you print out the signs, you should actually put property of the city of Lowell. That way there, when you go up and you tell them it's an illegal sign, you don't go up and put a void. You go up and take the sign. You can't take it unless it's, I mean, basically what you're doing right now is renting the sign anyways. You have to pay $10 a year for the sign, so you're basically renting it. If you have the signs printed, any sign in the city of Lowell, property of the city of Lowell, you have the authority to go take it, it's yours. So, I mean, that could help with some of the problems. And what I also suggest, if, we take the signs down, put up signs that say, no out-of-state vehicles parking from, overnight. And that would basically eliminate any of these New Hampshire cars. There's a house over on Crosby Street, they have about 10 New Hampshire cars over there. And they're all over the neighborhood, there's, it's out of control, and it's so tight parking down back Central Street, you don't know where to park, especially, with the one-way and people with placards and the way they have it, it's out of control. So, those are just a couple of things I like to see addressed by the city. Thank you for your time.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Daly. So we'll ask, I don't know, maybe Mr. Slagle could address some of the questions. So generally, what we've learned from Mr. Daly and from going to the back central neighborhood meeting is, we understand that it's a unique situation. Every neighborhood is. It's a tight neighborhood. But, any suggestions on placards versus permits for the, permit parking for the cars, put a sticker on the car? What's the difference between that? What do you think might work better over there? I think I saw the chief here. Yep, sorry. The out-of-state plates, that's always been an issue. And I know that there's a procedure, we have to watch the driveway or the cars for so many days. And people just get aggravated because it does cost so much money to insure your cars in the city of Lowell. And then when people go out of state, and then the other thing was, I guess, with some of the new streets and sidewalks, we just want to make sure that it's safe for vehicles to go down, police, fire. I know people, they find their own way to do it. But as long as we can just check periodically, make sure that apparatus can get up and down the street. So before we let Mr. Slagle go, did anybody on the committee have something?
First off, I want to thank the different neighborhood groups for being here and telling us of your concern with parking problems in your neighborhood. Back Central area is always very difficult, but I thought many years ago we had an ordinance specifically designed for parking in the Back Central neighborhood, in that, from what I'm understanding, if you had a driveway, you were not allowed to have a parking placard in front of your house. Does that still stand today?
That is correct.
Okay, and the second thing is, I know how frustrated it can be to see out-of-state vehicles parked in your neighborhood, but I think it's against the law to say that you can't park there or have a sign depicting that. Would that be kind of, I don't know that you could actually have a sign to do that.
Counselor, I think you're right. We do monitor out-of-state vehicles in the neighborhoods. We do it two ways. We do it self-initiated by the police department a lot of times through motor vehicle stops and motor vehicle enforcement. The other way that we monitor that is when we get complaints from people that live in the community, specifically about an address or a motor vehicle that obviously it becomes apparent to the neighbors that the vehicle's there in violation of the state ordinance, the state regulations. So we have to track these vehicles for approximately 30 days. That's the actual requirement of the statute. And we do send officers to do that. They track them. They have a logbook, and they track them for 30 days. And when the 30 days is up and they've satisfied the requirements of the statute, we issue criminal complaints against them in the district court.
See, Bill, that's how you have to work it. I know, I'm sorry to say it, but we can't violate the law, and I know how frustrating it can be. Go ahead, Bill.
It can be done, it's been done in cities all over the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. You can restrict parking. I've checked with the state. The state says the city owns the streets. They can do whatever, they can rip them up, they can do whatever they want with them. It can be, and it has been done all over the Commonwealth. You can check with Bob Healy, he was a city manager in Cambridge. They do it in Cambridge, they do it in Boston, they do it in Woburn, they do it in Winchester. You can restrict the parking. It's all over the state. And it's very simple. Just put up signs and say, you're not restricting them from coming and visit someone during the day. Just restrict them from parking overnight, and you're gonna eliminate the, and like the
So-
chief said, like
so
the
Bill-
chief says, you know, you have to watch it. Well, it has to be the same officer basically doing that, and they have different shifts, and then you break that pattern, you have to start all over again. And all you can do is give them a citation. They can stay there, as long as they don't get pulled over for another violation, there's nothing the police can do.
So
know,
then
it-
what good would a sign then if there's nothing the police can do?
If you put no parking overnight, put a hook and they're gone. They won't park a second time. It can be
Yeah.
eliminated real easy, put those signs up and have it enforced. That's one problem you would eliminate, and you have more park. And commercial vehicles, there's more school buses, all sorts of vehicles all over the neighborhood. You know, they have their own personal vehicle, then they have a company vehicle, and they're taking up all these spaces. And people are
Well,
driving.
that's another issue, commercial vehicles parked in any neighborhood.
Well, that's what I mean. If you put up the signs, it can be enforced. It's not breaking the law. They do in all these other cities surrounding towns.
We'd have to check on that with Bob
just-
Healy,
yeah, like I
because
said, check with
I've
Bob
never
Healy.
heard, I've never heard of that.
Oh,
Because
you-
I'm thinking about the parent that has a daughter or a son that lives out of state and they came overnight and they're parking. I wouldn't want them to not be able to park in the neighborhood because they have an out-of-state plate.
Well, I mean, you know,
But like the chief said, they can monitor that for 30 days, and that's what the law states.
well, that's to give them a citation, but like, nothing can be done. You can give them a citation and the car still stays there unless you break some kind of whether you pull over for some other kind of violation, nothing can be done. Absolutely nothing can be done
Well,
about that.
we'll check into that.
I appreciate
but-
it. Thank you.
But the question remains is, we have an ordinance on the books, so who does a person call? The parking department, DPW, the traffic engineer? And Mr. Chairman, if I could introduce Nicholas Bozzanetto right here, who is replacing Eric Eby as the transportation engineer. So I just wanted the public to meet you, welcome aboard. And so that's the question, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Who do we call? That's a good question.
Sure, if someone wants to answer that first.
Okay, just a little bit of background, and I'll answer that question. Historically, the parking ordinance had been administered by the building department. In the most recent revamp of the ordinance, the parking department became the primary administration for the parking ordinance. So they take in all the applications and they issue the parking placards consistent with the ordinance. So that's where the placards are issued. As the councilors have mentioned, the parking ordinance pays specific attention to Back Central because of the unique situation that Back Central is in, and specifically states that you're not entitled to have a parking placard in Back Central if you have a driveway or some other off-street parking place, either owned or leased to that property. As kind of an aside, I think part of the challenge is that as we all know, this is just a symptom of a problem with Back Central that won't be fixed no matter what the ordinance says, which is that they're very tight streets and there are a lot of houses and not sufficient on-street parking for the number of residents that are there. That's just a fact of the matter in Back Central. So what the parking ordinance attempts to do is to create a little bit of guidelines about enabling a resident to have one parking space in front of their property. Unfortunately, in Back Central, that often delineates the entire parking area in front of a building, so it does make it a little bit challenging. I know that historically, and Jim Troop, who's the head of the parking department, can also speak to this probably at least as well as I can or better, but I know that we had old placards. We call them the red parking placards, which were the historic old placards, which are no longer valid. And when the council passed the ordinance back in, I believe, 2012, there was a requirement that all of the red placards be turned in. The vast majority of them were turned in, but we're all aware of the fact that there are red placards that are still out there in the city. When they are found, they're either voided out with void stickers by the city staff, or and/or a notice is sent to the property owner that they're in violation of the ordinance and not allowed to have a red placard, and that they need to bring that in and turn it in. So the off-street parking is a little bit more challenging, in part because the ordinance refers to not just owned off-street parking, but leased off-street parking. And the reality is that the city, we don't know whether or not a dwelling unit has some sort of leased off-street parking. And oftentimes we don't know whether or not a parking area is off-street that's delineated for a particular unit. So the application that the city created, that the parking department puts out, requires a person to certify when they come in and apply for a placard that they don't have an off-street driveway or off-street parking, and that they have sufficient frontage on their property. Supposed to have 20 feet of street line in order to get a parking placard. So they have to certify that in the application, and then at that point they're issued the parking placard. They're entitled to have one spot.
So, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So if I come into City Hall and I have no driveway and I want to get a placard for in front of my house, and it's in front of my house, I could park 2 vehicles, where do I put this placard? Not in the middle of the property. Where would I put it then?
Well,
The right or the left, or?
well, the ordinance specifically states that the parking spaces, I'll read it directly. The parking spaces designated as reserved under this section shall be located in such a manner as to maximize the remaining unreserved parking spaces. So you're supposed to place it either on one side or the other, so that if you have sufficient areas for 2 spaces in front of your property, the intent of the ordinance is that you reserve one for yourself and you'll leave one for a neighbor. As you can imagine, that's
Yes.
really hard to police.
Yeah, I understand.
But that's the intent of the ordinance.
Okay. So you wouldn't put it in the middle of the property, the middle of the frontage? You wouldn't?
You shouldn't.
You shouldn't? Okay, thank you.
Before Council Samaras goes, so if someone does have a concern in the neighborhood, do they call the parking department or the neighborhood?
Yep. Excuse me, Counselor, the first point of contact, if there are any issues with any of the signs, red or green, should come to the parking department.
Okay, all right, thank you. Council Samaras?
Thank you. I've attended a lot of neighborhood meetings, and all of the inner city neighborhoods have the same issue. And for some, they like the placards, others, they like the stickers. I mean, there's no one answer because there is no easy answer. For me, on the back Central Street area, the first would be safety, whatever you have to do to ensure that fire engines and equipment like that can get down the streets. I'm not sure how we do that, but that's, I think, a major goal to assure safety is one thing. When people were talking about the New Hampshire plates, the information that came to me was not so much that people from out of state coming in, but that people who live in the area have seeking New Hampshire plates or getting their insurance out of New Hampshire because of some issue. And I think that's the problem. That's a problem I would say, as Mr. Daly's right, we go after those type of people because they're abusing the process. They're taking away, they're not paying their fair share for the car on the road. Lowell's not getting any income from that. So Chief, you talked about what a lot of them want, would they call it, what's the best way? Would they call the traffic? Would they call parking? Would they call your office?
Well, to keep it simple, they can call the regular 3200 business line because it
Okay.
would be a non-emergency call, and then they can get referred. We typically will send a police officer out to start the investigation, and then because it does involve, some tracking of the vehicle and the location, it's referred to our tracking department, our traffic department.
Yeah.
So they can do either. They can call the 3200 number, or they can call our traffic unit number, which would be directly into the investigators that would track it.
Mike Damaris is here from the Neighborhood as a representative of the neighborhoods. And maybe, Mike, what you could do is ensure that people get that type of information through your neighborhood meetings. I think it's important. The issue is sometimes confusion. Who do we call? I mean, everybody's willing, but I think it should be one party on that. If it's abuse of, it's illegal abuse, it should be the police station. But the issue of stickers versus placard versus, I know in Somerville, if you're a guest in somebody's house, you have to put a placard inside your car on the dashboard. Do we have that type of situation, Lowell?
Yeah, we also have, not only are we talking about the reserved dwelling signs, but we also have resident permit stickers for cars that are registered in the residential permit zones, and we also have a visitor pass program that is an option in those resident permit zones as well.
So do we have different neighborhoods that have a different approach to it? Some
Yeah, they're
prefer the
specifically,
stickers?
correct, they are specifically designated in the city ordinances.
I know if we were to ask people to vote on what they would prefer, I mean, we'd get a mixed review. Do you have based on the work in the neighborhoods, do you have an idea what's preferred over, what's the more preferred way? Or is there a preferred way? We know it's a difficult problem, and we're throwing a difficult problem onto your laps, but, people come from these neighborhoods, and it's, when you can't find your parking spot, or it's so difficult to get a good parking spot or a safe parking spot, it becomes very frustrating. And how do we?
Yeah, I agree, Counsel. The issue is very neighborhood-specific, because in the Back Central neighborhood, they aren't designated as residential streets, so they don't require the residential permit.
Okay.
Thus, they are turning to the green signs that we're talking about right now.
Yeah.
If you go to the North and South Campus, they prefer both. They prefer to have both a residential sticker and to reserve a sign, so you can see the challenges in those areas are even greater, trying to coordinate both programs and incorporate them in to maximize the parking supply.
Okay, yes.
I just wanted to kind of reiterate the point I made earlier, which is either one of these programs, regardless of how we do it, is going to run into the problem of supply and demand, which is in a lot of the neighborhoods, especially Back Central. Whether we had a residential sticker program or the placard program, there simply isn't going to be enough parking for every household that has a vehicle and that is a resident to be able to find a parking space whenever they want one. I mean, there is no answer to that falls under either one of these programs. That's just the challenge.
No, I understand. Well, actually, some of the complaints were that some people would say, well, I have a neighbor and there's 5 people in the house, and all five people have cars at this point. I mean, that's the type of society we live in, so there is no easy answer. But do you do some research in other communities, such as, I use Somerville as an example. They've had some success, and they have a lot of similar problems that we have, but they've had resources. I mean, do we look at other programs? Is there anything else out there that's maybe worth trying?
I know that as a parking director, I belong to a group of fellow parking directors throughout the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. There's a lot of information that's shared not only on this program, but other programs. It's a very valuable resource, and you're able to single out some very similar communities that face very similar challenges. But there's a definite mix that we've incorporated into our programs that unfortunately don't work in other cities, but then there's some that we probably could continue to evolve the whole parking structure in the neighborhoods and allow them to work in each particular neighborhood.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of examples to use.
I think the more information we can get out to people, the neighbors, I mean, the people who live in these areas, of what we're trying to do in the long run will help, because sometimes the frustration I found is some people feel alone in the sense they don't feel that, Chief, the example of somebody who has the New Hampshire plates, they know they live there, they know they're doing something illegal, and what do we do about it? And, there are so many other issues that we want the police to spend more attention on, and we understand that, so sometimes we back off a little bit and say, well, maybe the parking department should do it. There's no easy answer, but the thing is, I think the more we can communicate with the neighbors, and Mr. Damaris does a lot of that. He'll take, I know, I've seen him say, I'll take the information to the right departments, which is correct. I think people have to see more of that, as much as they can. Thank you.
Thank you. Just state your name for the record so they can get it.
My name is Kevin Cheney. I've lived in the city of Lowell for 45 years, in Pawtucketville, a matter of fact. My son goes to the McAvenue School. And I do agree that you have to have parking reserved for certain people, but when somebody's got parking for 6 cars and then they're reserving the parking in front of their house so that people don't park there to pick their children up, and there's no other place for them to park, they're not going to be parked overnight, or they're not a college student. My wife basically was down there today and she got a ticket. She wasn't parked we're from Pawtucketville, picking up my son. She had to go into the school. She was parked, we took a video of the car where it was, went down to the parking department, and they said, well, the whole area is restricted parking. Well, there's nothing saying it's restricted. There's no sign in front of it, the green signs. It wasn't even a red sign that was in front of the place. And she got a $25 ticket. Now, I understand why people want to reserve the parking there, because people double park when they're picking their kids up. Excuse me. And it really, I mean, the girl that's the crossing guard there has been hit like 2 or 3 times. The only time we get anything cleared up there is if we have a police officer there. It's a pretty bad situation. If you go by there when they're picking the kids up, they do have a setup where you're supposed to pull up, pick your kid up and leave, but people pull up on the outside and stop people from using the system. And if you can't park, I mean, I know people in Pawtucketville everywhere, they say where I live isn't a place that I can get a residential parking sticker. Well, before I could, so if I wanted to stop and see my friend down on Fifth Ave or in that area, I wouldn't get a ticket. And I just don't understand. We've gone down to like I said, to the parking department to ask, and they're just like, well, there's nothing we can do about it, just pay the ticket. And that's why I'm here tonight, because I guess we all have to get together and see what we can do about these things. This isn't back Central Street. There is ample parking, and we're not college kids just parking for the day, and I'm kind of upset about it,
Who's writing the tickets out at the school?
I got the ticket right here, hold on.
But I mean, would that be,
I would think it would be a parking,
would be a parking attendant up at the
something, yeah. It says they've got a photo. I would like to see the photo, because I also have a photo. The next house up from where she was parked, there's an old red sign, but there is no green sign. I think 3 or 4 houses up there are, and I can respect that. But the other thing that I noticed in the area, there's no parking for disabled people. So now if you're disabled and you have to go see, his grandmother has to go pick him up, she can't walk far, and she can't pull into these places because people are double parked. The school has 2 parking areas in the parking lot itself for disabled people, but they're filled, I think, with teachers that probably have a disability, which is okay, but I think this is something that has to be addressed too.
Okay, no, you're right. I mean, if someone's
I don't
using a
mind
handicap spot at the school temporarily, they should open up a third one.
Right, we should just look at it, and I just want to try to make things better.
Sure.
And I guess this is the only way I can, because if I go down to the city hall here and I just get, well, pay the ticket, I don't mind paying a ticket if I'm at fault. If I've done something wrong, I parked in an area and it's restricted, so be it, I should pay the ticket. But if I live in a neighborhood and there's no yellow marking on the curb, there's no sign that says this area is designated residential parking, well, I believe if I live in Pawtucketville, I'm a resident. Mm-hmm. And I should be able to drive down the street and park and see a friend of mine that I've known for years.
Sure.
And like I said, I get a ticket and I'm not really happy about it, so.
Well, we'll check into that and just get the details if it's when it
Absolutely.
was and what it was, so. Sure, Counselor.
Where did you get this ticket? In front of the McAvenue
On the opposite, well, I'm sure you're
Avenue
familiar.
School on Mammoth Road? Which,
Michelle, come on up. She was actually driving the car.
and you got the ticket at what school?
Yes, I was parked on Fourth Avenue and Mammoth, but I was across the street from the school on Fourth Avenue.
So away from, not right up against the corner.
And so what time is the,
I'd gone there at 8:30 this morning, this morning was to have a meeting with his teacher. And when I came out this morning, that was when I got the ticket, but I've gotten 2 other ones also this year, just in the school year.
Oh, all right. Because it is tight around.
I'm trying to figure this out through you, Chief. They're going to school anytime during the day to either visit a teacher about their child, or they're going to park there to wait for the child to come out. How do we exempt people from doing, what are we going to ticket people to be concerned parents? I mean, this is a real serious problem that I'm not going to want to check later on.
When I called the parking department today, they said the parking spots are to reserve spots for the residents. But during the school zone, during school time, there's nowhere to park at all over there.
That should be lifted during school hours.
Well, that's what I mean. We'll
That's
take a
what
look
we
at
should
that
be
and
doing.
see
We
what-
can look at, Counselor, I'm gonna, I haven't seen the ticket, but I suspect it was from a parking clerk, in all likelihood. But we can certainly visit that in that particular location and see if we can put some signage there that would allow a certain number of spots, in close proximity to the school during the school time hours, so that residents could use it, parents could, use it to go in and out of.
That's a very serious issue, what I'm listening to. That could be any one of us going to pick up our
Right.
child, and they're going to come out and get a $25 ticket. That is not fair. I don't know what we can do about it now to say, well, we're going to squash it. I don't think that we could do that, but we need to address some laws in this city so that good tax-paying people picking up their child are not going to get ticketed. This is wrong. What do you think?
Well, no, I was just going to suggest that, Mr. Troop also knows this as well. There's an appeal process from the ticket that goes to the municipal hearing officer that obviously is that's the way to
I would
proceed
appeal
with
it. I would appeal it,
Yes, we are.
what I would do. And we should start changing the laws to help out tax-paying people that are concerned parents for their children. Whether a teacher calls and says, come on in and we got to discuss your child, and they don't have fear that they're going to come out and have a ticket. That's not right for hardworking people in this city, and this is a good meeting for you to discuss that, and I'm not passing it off under a rug. I want some serious work to be done to alleviate this problem, because I'm sad for you. This could have happened to any one of us.
I did
That's not right.
Up until a month ago, I was volunteering at the school, but because of the parking tickets, I had to stop because it's just overwhelming. I had nowhere to park.
Well, there you go. So we should create a buffer zone of eliminating that restriction so good parents can come to the school to volunteer or do something for their school in our city. We talk about education, being responsible, good parents, and we're going to reward you by giving you a $25 ticket. That's not fair, and we're going to do something about it.
Well, that's why we're here, just to
All
have a
right.
good discussion
That's,
about this.
I can't help you now, but we can help you in the future. I'm
Thank you.
sorry.
Yeah,
Thank you.
We'll fix that. Counselor Morris?
Thank you for your time.
Samaras?
But I think, regard to parking by the school, I believe, Chief, you can't have any parking by a school during the school day, correct? I mean, especially the ones like,
Well, it's a little difficult because we're not there, but I suspect the location that this family's
On the
talking
street.
about is not right up against the school. I suspect it's in close proximity to the school, but probably abuts that residential neighborhood there. So, with the parking department in conjunction with the traffic engineer and the police department, we can look at it and see if we can make an adjustment.
I think what you have is, some of the schools, they have ample parking in their area, but some of these schools are part of the inner city.
Right.
And you just can't, because of fire laws, have them parked right there. So I think you have to look at the neighboring streets, as Councilor Mercia has stated, to possibly give some more options for people. Thanks.
Thank you. Do we want to stay in Pawtuckaville while we're here? Does Pawtuckaville neighborhood have anything to add?
Good evening, Paul Belay, East Pawtuckaville Citizens Group. If I could just hand out a couple of things to the chief and... Yeah, thank you very much. I'd like to thank Councilor Rourke and Councilor Samaras for bringing our concerns forward. The handout that I've given you here shows University Ave, across from Dunkin' Donuts, right, is Riverside Street, and across from Dunkin' Donuts, there's a couple of other sub shops that you can't see. Then moving further up, there's, across from the Egg Roll, there's a barber shop, there's a church, and a couple of other residences right there. The orange line you're looking at is what I thought was a fire lane. And so after speaking to Chief Pitter, he went out there to take a look at it, and he said, that's not a fire lane. It's a no parking zone, and it's painted in yellow on the streets where I have it marked. So then we heard that, 40 years ago, they put the no parking there because the Harley Davidsons would be starting up late at night and be waking up the neighborhoods. Well, all those guys are in their 60s now, and they're in bed by 10 o'clock. So then, after visiting the businesses and talking to some more people, I found out from a Mr. Shuttenoff, longtime resident in Pawtucketville, where the X's on the map that I gave you, there's a small park and there's a basketball court back there. Mm-hmm. The Saint Jean d'Arc Parish had a basketball league, and they used to use that basketball park for their leagues. And the orange lines that you see there, a city councilor at the time had that put in so parents could pick up and drop off their children after the basketball league. Now, we're talking 40 years ago now. So the businesses are concerned because they have no parking, because the students are eating up all the spaces. Across from the Pawtucketville Social Club, there's a small municipal parking lot there where Armin LeMay's little park is. That's always full. Residents are eating those spots up too. So we talk about economic development, we talk about helping out the businesses. I'd like to see these orange areas freed up for parking for the businesses and for the club and for the residents. So I'm just bringing that forward to you, Mr. Chairman, and Councilor Samaras and Councilor Mercia.
Okay, thank you. So we'll have whatever department take a look at that, see what adjustments we can make in that section of University Ave. And I know we tried to work on some snow issues this year to free up the parking. Did you have any comments on that? Did you notice
Well,
any improvements with the snow plowing? I know we had a lot of snow, but.
Well, my co-chairman was there, Steve Brogan, he's probably back there doing his thing. But we had some issues with the corners, and Mr. Councilor Samaras and Councilor Rourke, they addressed those issues and they cut the corners back. So, I mean, we had an unusual winter, so. And as you know, that neighborhood's pretty tight anyway there, between University Ave down to Mammoth Road, so.
Sure.
Yeah, so, anyway, thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Councilor Samaras?
Do we have some of that information, because I know you've been working on some of it. I mean, could we speak on it a little bit tonight? Are we prepared, or?
Are you talking about the issue of parking in front of the social?
Correct.
There really isn't enough room. When you look at the width of the street with parking on one side and 2 lanes of traffic, there's not enough room left for another parking space on the other side of the street.
Would that endanger fire trucks going down the street and things like that?
And regular vehicles, yes.
Regular vehicles?
Yeah, there just isn't enough. As it is, the delivery vehicles that pull in there now have to park on the sidewalk.
Let me ask you this, there is the parking across, the Armin LeMay Park from the Pawtucket Social Club, and that's a 4-hour parking spot. I know some of the neighbors have complained that, it's also for the students, during the day it's used by many of the students. Is there a possibility of even taking half of that and putting it into like a 2-hour parking area? So the thing is, people who want to attend the businesses that are on that street have some
Mr. Troop can
recourse.
address that, but before we move on, at least the width of the street, Gardner Ave, where Mr. Belay had that,
Yes.
that also was pretty narrow, and I don't think that was going to fit there either. If we tried to put parking along, because as you go along Gardner Ave, there is no parking right now on the right-hand side, and we thought that might be a good location, but when we got out on site, it turns out it's just as narrow. So from a width standpoint, it won't work on the street, but as far as the turnover of the spaces, Mr. Troop can.
Yeah.
Yeah, Counselor, we've actually had some preliminary discussions talking about a mix of 2-hour and 4-hour parking in that garage. I couldn't make a recommendation right now, but one thing that must be considered is there's only on-street spaces, maybe 10 on University Ave and maybe 4 or 5 on Gershom, and then everything else in that neighborhood is restricted for residential permit only, so
Okay.
further restricts some of the options that we have in that area.
But, I mean, so you're going to look into it so we can help some of the businesses and some
Yeah,
of the
like I
people
said,
there.
we've had some preliminary discussions about that already.
Okay, thank you for that.
Counselor Mercy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do we know if the businesses along the corridor are parking in the Gardner Street lot? Because years ago, there was some business owners on that corner that bought into the city to make permanent parking spots for them so they could free up that main corridor and park in the lot, and they paid a rate like everybody else paid. So do we know if, because I really don't think these people that own the business should be parking in front of the area themselves. So do we know if they paid into the parking there? And I know that students are parking there as well, I understand that, but if we get the signage that say, I think, if you're going in to get a sub there, or you're going into the egg roll restaurant, or you're going in to get, I don't think you need to park there 2 hours, you know what I'm saying? But if you're a student and you want to park there all day, then we could know if there's a ticket person, supervisor, to track the tires and see if they're following. I know that it's tough, but if we assign a meter maid or traffic supervisor person in that area to make sure that someone's not monopolizing the time and the turnover is pretty good for those businesses. If it's a student and they're parking there all day, you know downright well they should get a ticket, because this is hurting the businesses there. At the same time, I'd like the businesses to be able to buy into the parking lot so they can free up time too.
I agree with you, Counselor, and looking at the turnover of those spaces indicates that the businesses or business owners are not necessarily using that lot. In the past, there was some spaces that were allocated to, and I can't remember the business, it goes before me.
Faneros, for one.
Correct.
Universal Properties.
Closest to where the rain garden is. There were some spaces that were allocated to the businesses. But the one thing that we have conceded in the parking department is, knowing that most of the area is residential permit parking only, is we've extended visitor pass options to some of those businesses. But as it is, if there are particular demands of any of the businesses, then I would welcome them to contact, and we can look to see what options are available to try and help them out.
That's right, that would be good, thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Rourke?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you, Jim Troop. Mr. Troop, I think Councilor Samaras and I were under the impression that there were some more available spots on Gardner and/or Gershom Ave, maybe up to 5 or 6 extra spots. Is that still in the plans?
You know, I just found out through the city engineer's response that it doesn't appear that it's wide enough. If it was deemed wide enough, then we would be able to put parking there. The best example to look at that would be the 5 or 6 spaces that are on Gershom, and I had envisioned it to be very similar, but if it's not wide enough, that would be a determination through the engineer's office, and it sounds as if it isn't wide enough for the emergency vehicles.
That's the only criteria, is just if it's wide enough for emergency vehicles to get up and down that street? So cars parked on both sides, you couldn't get a fire truck down there?
Correct.
Mr. Belay?
Gardner Street is a one-way street. It's plenty wide to get a fire truck down there.
Oh, all right, that one. But if we have parking on both sides, that's what we're discussing, it would limit it?
Yeah.
Okay. But so that's what they're saying, though, if we have parking on both
I mean,
sides.
obviously I'm not an engineer, but I mean, in going down there with Mr. Belay, but earlier, it seemed like there was more than enough room, but, you know, I understand not being an engineer, but I had thought that was a solution to the problem originally.
Okay.
and
Is
then-
there,
If I may?
Sure.
I'm sorry. I went out and measured all these areas. Gardner, you're correct, it's one way. If you were to put parking on both sides there, the travel lane would be restricted. We want at least an 11-foot travel lane to be able to get down there safely. It would constrain it to about, I think it was 7 feet or so. I parked my car there on the orange line just to get out and measure, and you could barely get a car through there with parking on both sides.
On Gardner Street? So you had car parked on both sides, you only had 7 feet between the two vehicles?
Right.
What kind of cars were you parking? Not to be, to be funny, but I'm just curious to see.
Talking about Gardner Avenue.
Right.
Yeah,
Oh, okay, all right, thank you.
Sorry.
Well, that's what we have now. Right now, we just have parking on one side up there.
Yes, there's only parking on one side up to where the entrance to the parking lot is. After that, it appears there is parking on both sides of the street, further up the road.
Yep, I think there is. Okay. All right. Well, I mean, if you have the measurements, do we know how, I mean, you measured the street and everything, and then, okay. Okay. Anything else, Councilor Rook? Okay, all right. I know that's why we're here. We're gonna discuss all this. It's a little frustrating for everybody, but, you know, we're trying to come up with good solutions for everybody in the neighborhood, so. Sure, Mr. Lett?
Sorry. Good evening, everybody. My name's Dave Willett. I'm here tonight as the president of Action Acre Neighborhood to improve our neighborhood. We've been having meetings on the Upper Merrimack Street issue coming down to the Smith Baker. As a matter of fact, our last meeting was at Lowell Housing at the Mercier Center. We're having another one the third Wednesday of April. Gary Wallace will be there. UMass Lowell will be there. I hope people from the city will be there, and we're going into a good discussion. Last time we had over 50 people there. Thank you, Bill and John, for coming out that evening also. So I've met with Nick, our new guy over here. We went for a good walk. Thank you, Nick. And one of the main spots that we're kind of looking at is, in one of the discussions, because we're talking with the university up that end, this down this end, but with Lowell Housing right over here, especially with this past winter, they ran into some issues where they're actually having fistfights. They're having slashing each other's tires because there's not enough parking over here. And since they've put in the meters, like right here, when you look out Dummer Street, usually meters are put to like do a turnover for business. There's no businesses over there. There's just only parking meters. So once that happens, all the people who live in Lowell Housing now, if they go out there, they wake up in the morning with a nice ticket on their car. So it's created a lot of frustration for them, and you can see it right out the window. There's absolutely no business there. And so that's created one problem. So we're hoping that it can go one way or the other if they can't be removed. I talked with Dennis Mercier, he's the head of the North Common now, that, and Nick, that if maybe each apartment, no matter if you have 6 cars, you're only allowed 1 parking placard for Lowell Housing. And they're also doing a strict tow rule that if any cars that don't belong there are gone. So the same thing that if you have a Lowell Housing sticker, that if you're parking there, you won't get ticketed, that if you're a resident and this is right in front of your house. So just trying to find something to equal out the playing field for the people who are actually living in public housing over here. Because it's not to turn over for a business. There's no businesses here.
No, I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, there are meters on the side of the Olympia restaurant.
Yeah, that's on
Businesses
Market,
that side.
yes. It's when you turn the corner here to Dutton going towards Macharis.
Right, okay.
And even further up from Olympia, like maybe if you kept it from there to Suffolk Street, but there's a few spots given over here would give some relief for the people in the housing also.
Okay.
And then during the week on April 15th at 6 o'clock at the Mercier Center, that's when we're going to have a whole crew of people and see what else problems we can alleviate, because Lowell Housing's thinking of putting up a big new building. And right now at the corner of Decatur, Merrimack, in that Market Street, Salem Street area, there's already not enough parking. So we're just talking about before they put it up, you can't correct the problem after. So right now there's no parking during the day, so if they throw in another 60 units there on the Mercier parking lot area, we won't have nothing. The other businesses are already all frustrated in the area, like Trucks Beauty Salon. They already have no parking. Well, you've seen that at the meeting. So thank you all. Just
All right, thank you.
thank you.
We can revisit that, Mr. Troop. I'll look around Dummer Street and Market Street where the housing is. So, okay, all right. All right, so we're moving right across the city. Did Centerville have anything? Come on down, Anne Marie.
My name is Anne Marie Page. I reside at 26 Fremont Street. I sit on the board of the Centerville Neighborhood Action Group, and I'm the vice president of the Citywide Neighborhood Council. And the calls that I've been receiving on parking are mainly two issues. One, enforcement, please. We have green plaques, we have red plaques. This is not Christmas. If we're supposed to have a green plaque, we have a green plaque. You go by the red plaque, some have a big black sticker, which sends a message this is no good. The one across the street from me doesn't have a big black sticker, it just sits there in bright red. Then the other issue is somebody mentioned school buses. There are little school buses, there are medium school buses, and there are big giant school buses. And they stay in the neighborhoods 24/7. Then we have the other issue of industrial vehicles, very big industrial vehicles. And after a few phone calls, we did get one of them to move over. It moved over from a residential street to a private business parking lot, but it is still not an industrial vehicle parking lot. There are certain areas in the city that are designated for industrial vehicles. There are some over in the area of Western Avenue that are designated, you can rent. You're Mr. Smith, you own this much land. You have the right to rent me a parking spot for my industrial vehicle because it is so very big. It's too big to be parked in the neighborhood. And so what we're asking is enforcement, whether it be a school bus that's parked 24/7, a very large industrial vehicle, and it's just enforcement, that's all. We realize this has been a terrible winter, so we've all had to just live with it. But now that the snow is eventually melting, we could and spring is somewhere along the way, we can get a little more enforcement on these placards. If it's green, it's good. Green means go, red means stop. Stop, no good. Stick the black sticker on it and be on your merry way. That's all the calls that I've been getting in parking, and I thank you very much. We appreciate all your hard work.
Thank you. Yeah, maybe that's something we can take a look at if someone in whatever department can go around, and I don't know if we can put a notice on it saying that this black placard card needs to be turned in to get a green one, or if they're not using it, we just take them as, are we allowed to do that, or?
Well, we have, the parking department has a large quantity of void stickers that, that are put onto the red
If we
placards.
put a void sticker on it, are we allowed to take it? Is it our sign, or is it their sign, or what's
That's
the
a
determination
very
on that?
tricky proposition. I mean,
Okay.
especially considering that most often these are not just leaning up against a fence, they're attached to a piece of property, or they're inside a
Okay.
window.
Can we ask them to take it down or come down and get a new card? Is that what that void sticker says?
They're
or-
absolutely required to take it down. The question is whether, I don't believe we're comfortable having city staff physically taking things off of people's property.
Okay,
That's
but if
a
we can put a void sticker on it, maybe we can have a new sticker up that says this is null and void and you must be removed in 30 days, and please come down and apply for a new placard if you need one. So, okay, all right, thank you. And I did want to mention, I know that the chief, you have been going out and looking at these larger vehicles, so I want to give you some credit for that, so, we'll keep working on that, because naturally, we don't want to, if someone's making a living being a truck driver, that's one thing, but you got to abide by the rules and know that you can't come into your neighborhood and park it overnight, so, did you have anything to add on that, or just, I wanted to say thank you for the work you've been
I
doing on that.
appreciate that, Counselor. Thank you very much. On occasion, we do get complaints from residents living in neighborhoods, more residential areas, of vehicles that exceed the gross vehicle weight limit that can park in a neighborhood. And so we go out and address that. And our usual preference is to try and enter into a cooperative agreement with the person that owns the vehicle and try and get them to find a more appropriate location to park the vehicle. So we've been
Thank you.
pretty successful in that.
Yeah. Sure, Mr. Daly?
Can we just get some clarification on this? I know we decided we're going to have the parking department enforce the parking ordinances now. So, I mean, if you have a problem, I mean, it's all over. They know about it. Who's going to tell them, sick them, go get them?
All right, for which, we're all, tonight, we get all our notes, we're gonna work on these issues.
Well, I
So
mean,
depending
like
on which issue,
Like the placards, the void ones, the red and white ones or
Yeah.
whatever. And then you have all the other, the green ones, which I brought up. I says 99.9% of them are right in the middle of their property.
okay,
And like, maybe if, we rewrite the ordinance so it's not up to anyone's interpretation. It just says you put it at the end of your property and get 20 feet, and that's it.
all right,
And
well,
make
we
sure-
can take a look at that and make sure, because I'm sure, depending on where your door is on your front of your house, that maybe people putting it in the middle of the house, but yeah, if it should be at one end of the house or the other, and your doorway's at one end, they should be putting them at the other end, sure.
I mean, just so, but like I said, most of them, and there's a lot of them that, do have driveways, garages, and they still have placards. And like I said, I'd like to see that address have, if.
Oh, yeah, we can
if
take a
the
look at
parking
that. I mean, if you're not supposed to have one because you have a driveway, then when we'll make our rounds and we'll take a look at this and we'll come up with a new sticker if we can that says, void and you need to replace this. Call the office of parking department to come down and get your new placard because this needs to be removed in 30 days or.
But what I'm asking is, are we going to have the parking department now, if it's their baby, go out and start enforcing this, is what I'm saying. And like I said, I'd like to see the ordinance address it, so, it's determined, you put it at the end, or, so, I mean, no one can say, well, don't say this, because like. you
Okay,
read the
yeah,
ordinance-
no, we'll definitely take a look
you
at that.
read the
Yep.
ordinance now, it just says, you can interpret it a few different
Mm-hmm.
ways. I'd like to say, because you leave it up to people, they're gonna.
Sure.
And when this ordinance first come up, that's what I brought up. I said, people are gonna put that right in the middle of their property, and then you won't know which side you're supposed to, use. So, I mean, it has to be clear, you put it right at the end of your property, and that's it. And have, the parking department, and it'd probably be a good idea to put on a couple extra meter maids and assign them to the parking department, so it can be enforced. I mean, it's crazy having an ordinance if you're not
No,
gonna
I know.
enforce it.
Well, we all agree with that, so. All right,
Okay,
thank you.
thank you.
Yeah, we have a few more minutes. Did anybody, another neighborhood group have anything to add? So, okay. Well, I want to thank Councilor Samaras or Councilor Mercy or anything else to add? Sure, Councilor Samaras.
I just want to thank all the neighborhood people for coming down here. And I also want to thank our department heads for being here tonight, because you've shown that these are issues, some of them are very difficult to be solved. We know that. But the thing is, I think what I appreciate is that you're using your imagination and you're really looking into the situation and come up with various ways of doing this. There is no magic fix to this, but I think the more we work on it, the more information we get out to people, the more cooperation we have. And then in cases of, Chief, if we can, we'll say nail a few of these people who are using these, paying for their insurance out of state, doing some things like that, and in certain areas where we set in good examples of what you should do or what you shouldn't do, I think it'll have a long-term effect. So thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you. So again, thank you for everyone coming down. I want to thank the manager, Council Belanger, Council Rourke for being here. Yep, Council Milonazo hiding in the back, so he doesn't have to bring up any issues. And the department heads and chief, thank you. So, you know, we're not gonna drop the ball on this. We're gonna take a look at it. We'll take a look at the ordinance. We heard your concerns, and we'll address them. Thank you. We need to call the, motion to,
Motion to accept this as a report of progress.
second by, yep, okay. And then,
Motion to adjourn.
motion to adjourn by Council Mercia, second by Council Samaras. Thank you.
Thank you. Good job. That's a good idea about that sticker that says void on those red and white ones. Maybe people don't realize it.